Hey guys, welcome back to Luke's Garage. Today we're going to be working on the Dodge Ram. It has a shimmy in the wheel and it's not good. So I believe it's the outer tie rod from just looking at it and messing around with the tire. But we'll find out and I'll show you guys how to replace either the inner and the outer tie rod. Hopefully it's just the outer. But either way, pretty easy to do. Most of you guys can do it with basic tools and I will show you those tools, show you how to do it. On the Dodge Ram. I don't know why this thing keeps breaking. It only has 45,000 miles. Feel free to make fun of it. Open for business. What I'll do is grab the tire side to side. I have the truck jacked up so there's no load on the tire. You can see it spins freely, and then what I'll do is move the tire side to side, and you should either be able to feel it pop or hear a noise. So doing it on this tire, you can see it's pretty wobbly, quite a bit of noise. I'll move the camera under the truck to show you a little bit closer view and maybe get some noise out of what this will sound like. Here is a much better angle, so even just with grabbing the tire on this end with one hand, you can see with little pressure how much this moves. It shouldn't move this much. This tie rod is shot, so what we'll do is take this tire off and get to removing the tie rod and replacing it. With our outer tie rod and our inner tie rod now exposed, what I'm going to do is take a wire brush and clean up these threads, because I will mark these existing threads with paint. And what that'll do is provide you with a memory where to mark your new threads at. So using our white paint marker, you can buy these at any auto parts store. What you want to do is just hit those threads right up against the jam nut before you move or separate any parts. And a little closer angle, I'll make sure I put enough paint on there so that when I take this jam nut off, it doesn't take all the paint away, and I can remember exactly where these threads were. So when I install the new inner and outer tie rod, I can use this exact measurement and get a close enough measurement for alignment. I'll still need to take it in for a true alignment, but in the meantime, it will be close enough. With further inspection, I can tell that it is my outer tie rod, so you'll watch and you can probably hear. I'll grab and move this. You can actually see it move, and the slop that's in this joint, it shouldn't be that way, so this outer tie rod is bad. There's a little bit better view up close, so I'm not using very much pressure, but you can actually see the play in that joint. Now you want to loosen your jam nut, and you want to loosen your jam nut before you actually disassemble your outer tie rod lower end bolt. The reason being is you need that lower bolt down here holding this assembly in place, or else this will just keep twisting like so, and you will never be able to actually take that jam nut off. Okay, and with that loose, you back it off just a little bit. The next thing we'll do is remove this lower nut on the lower end of the outer tie rod, and this is a 13/16 nut on this Dodge Ram. At this point, the jam nut should be loose and the lower bolt on the outer tie rod should be off, and a lot of times these are stuck in place. This one actually popped right out, but what you do to get these undone is hit this knuckle with a hammer, or you can actually hit the bottom of these with a hammer as well. They also make a pickle fork which will pop these out, but there's numerous ways to get these out. Before I move the outer tie rod, I'm going to take a few measurements. So I'm going to take my tape and hook it. I'll show you guys right there on the end of that clamp, and I'm going to come back and see exactly where my jam nut is set. So I got 7 3/4, and I'm going to come back to about the center post of the outer tie rod, and I'm about 12 inches and a quarter. So I'll remember those just for more points to measure when I put the new one in. The next step, with all of your measurements taken and your jam nut loose, take this guy out and you just unthread the existing tie rod, outer tie rod end, till it comes off. And you want to maintain your jam nut in place because you've measured that. And you don't want to lose that measurement. Here is the factory tie rod end, and here is the new tie rod end. So this is a Moog, and I wanted to show you guys the difference between the two. So it takes all sorts of force to move this thing. And then here's the existing one. It is floppy, and if I pull it, I can feel it pop. Pops right here in the back of my hand. What I'll do is cut this boot open and show you guys, but totally sloppy. This truck has 45,000 miles. I'm surprised that this part is this bad already. But there you have it. Difference between the two. Generally on these new tie rod ends, you will need to install the grease fitting. So we've got that installed, and then once this part is all the way on the vehicle, we'll come back through and pump this full of grease. It should already be full of grease just from the factory, but we'll want to make sure we top it off before we put it in. The next step, grab your inner tie rod end, this guy, take your outer tie rod end and the new one, and screw it into place all the way up to your jam nut. At this point, you should have your outer tie rod snugly threaded on up to your jam nut. The jam nut isn't tightened down yet. If you grab this whole rod, the whole thing will spin, so it's okay if this portion of your inner tie rod spins, and I'll show you guys why. I have an extra inner tie rod, so if it spins, don't worry about that. It's meant to be that way. What we'll do now is insert the outer tie rod back into the knuckle, and we'll install all of our bolts and get this thing cranked down. Our new tie rod end came with a castle nut and a cotter pin, so we'll put the castle nut on. We'll get this thing torqued down to spec and put the cotter pin in place. Now with the castle nut and cotter pin in place, you can come back and tighten up your jam nut. And the final part of this install is we will grease this fitting. Okay, you can see grease starting to come around the joints, and that's when you stop filling it with grease. Okay, we are fully installed. Here is our tie rod end. We got our grease fitting. We have our castle nut with cotter pin in place, and our jam nut is tight with the paint right where it needs to be for now. What I'll do is take this and get it aligned. It's fairly close to where it was. If I shake this part, it doesn't shake, it doesn't rotate, doesn't move. That's how it should look. Moog makes good parts. So what I'll do is throw the tire back on. I'll shake the tire just to see if there's any other issues, but for all intents and purposes, we are done. As I was discussing earlier, so this is your inner tie rod end, and I was saying, you know, if it rotates, you don't need to worry because this inner tie rod end comes back into this joint and actually rotates in this joint. And this hooks to your rack. Here is the old tie rod end, and I want to see what it looks like inside, just to show you guys and myself where this actually went bad at. So we'll cut this boot off. And little ball. Yeah, it's super sloppy. I mean, there's nothing holding it in there, and it you can hear it popping. That was our noise. So yeah, it needed to be replaced. It shouldn't be like this at all, especially after 40,000 miles. But that's our issue. It's fixed.